Now, I would like to now give the floor to Joan Busquets. I already introduced him, but let me also add that he's a very prominent urban planner, and I think he's been working all his life in Barcelona, and he's actually just inaugurated a very important exhibition on Barcelona as a metropolitan scale city. And he's at the moment very busy with the city of Toulouse, where he has really helped the mayor reshaping the city. And of course, I know all his work in Toledo and many other sites. But I think one interesting thing of Joan is that he looks at cities in a very analytical way, perhaps learning a little bit from the Italian morphological school and so on. I think he has even elaborated a theory, which I find extraordinary, which he calls the urban planning from the south. Maybe he will tell you a little bit more about l'urbanistica del sud, which I think is very interesting because, in fact, it shows how urban planning also as a discipline can be very articulated. So, Joan, now it's your turn to give us your views and positions on these issues. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Francesco, for the introduction, and thank you to the Fondazione Cini for giving us the chance to share and to discuss, taking the example of Venice. I'd like to stress at the beginning that I think it's very important in case that we are discussing. I'm not going to talk exactly what to do in Venice, but I think my suggestion is perhaps Venice is in the right moment of rethinking it again. I think we, as Francesco said, the principle is that we have to, by designing a city, we have to research the city. That's the way. Yeah? Then just preparing that, and because Venice is an exceptional occasion, I like just to look a little bit on Venice. But when I'm showing Venice, don't take me seriously. I'm just using some images. Otherwise, I cannot talk if I don't see. Can I have the slides? Yeah. If I don't see what we have in mind. No? I think all the cities demand from us that we are always thinking on the cities, thinking and acting on the cities. But only a few times we can rethink the city. I don't think we should rethink the city every day, otherwise it makes a chaos. And sometimes we do this type of thing. No, I have an idea, I have another idea. Everybody has ideas, but it's a way, in a certain moment you have to, what they call rethinking, making vision for the city. How long the vision, nobody knows. But anyway, you have to do that. And I think this is what it seems to me that perhaps today, and because of this question, I mean, those are images that you know very well, but in a certain way, when you have this image, you can feel how exceptional Venice it is. I should not say, because you know that very well, but is what we can say is the city in the water. And that, I think, is exceptional. And there are other cities in the water, in the wall. But perhaps not with this special condition. As Francesco said before, I think the cities are always, they have something to tell each other, but all the cities are different. We know that in the previous presentation. I mean, there are never two cities that they are, fortunately. Even the cities that they are done by law, they are different because topography, because many factors that they make the cities different. But I think this idea that is the city in the water, in a certain way, I think is important, but at the same time, it's a city that is in the water, but in a very special condition in the water because of the effect of the lagoon. What it seems to me important in this discussion is the fact that the city, because of this gigantic flood 50 years ago, it happened something special in the city. And the city and the state create this project that is almost finished, the Moses project, and not enter into an evaluation of the project. But I consider that that gives... Closer, okay. Sorry. I was saying that the fact that you have this enormous catastrophe, the flooding 50 years ago, and the fact that the reaction was through this project without entering into the technical evaluation of the project, because I don't think it's the case and I don't have the expertise for that, but it seems to me that creates a fantastic occasion for taking this opportunity to think the city ahead, to rethink the city ahead. And that is what I like to just use this opportunity to talk about this. I think the city has this project. I know that it's not completed, but it's almost there. I know there have been stories in this project, but I am not entering into that. Probably you can imagine that could be other solutions for the, but anyway, I think we always have to learn what the past is giving to us and then make a good use of it. For instance, if you take the example of the Thames barrier, you can see how an element like that creates a lot of opportunities for London. The space of the East. Yeah. Probably, if we take an example that refers to the same type of questions, if you take the Thames barrier in London, it makes that a specific element, control of the water, the locals of the water, it goes better now? No. It's a question of the translation. I think probably what I'm trying to say is that probably the Moses project gives Venice, the region of Venice, the chances to think always what else we can do apart from controlling the flooding from the ocean, in one sense. On the other, I think you can see that most of these interventions have been always richer or wider in the scope than what they are proposing. They are not just a simple locker that makes the water under control, but they are always affecting and creating opportunities for the land near the water and creating also that certain pieces of the land could be safer. Because in the end, what we can see with this image is the idea that we always tend to imagine Venice, but Venice is something else. It's this gigantic territory where we can see how important is what happened on the terra firma, on the hinterland, but we can see all this blue, but also all this green, the lagoon, and all the system of different islands that they are on the space. In a way, that is what makes this condition so exceptional in my eyes. To move on, I like to take the advantage of some of the work that for me were quite inspiring. I'm sure that you are familiar to that, but this is one work from Margaret Plant, that she did this work about talking about the idea of fragile city, which I think we can, and I think Francesco mentioned before, the idea that it's a city that in its own environment, it becomes a system very fragile that could be changed and is always in continuous change. I think this work, which I think is a quite seminal work, done by an Australian academic, that studied that. And after that, well, she is proposing a discussion about the episodes of the city. But I like to draw your attention about the episodes that they are connected to certain interventions of the city. I feel I like you to draw your attention about certain plans, certain actions that the city did and that they are important even for today. When we look this fantastic card, this is from the 1346. I think it's an extraordinary piece from the Chronologia Magna. And I think this tells us a little bit the real story about the fragility of the city. Margaret Plant is, when he's talking about the current conditions, said, is Venice dead or dying? When we see that, we can very well imagine this idea of decadence that in a certain moment has been proposed. But I don't feel, and I'm going to subscribe, that perhaps Venice is more powerful than probably she is describing. And I feel Venice has really the potentials that we are going to see. But I think this map tells us something which I think is fantastic and unique in Venice. Is this idea that the layout of the city is something very organic, is a non-Euclidean city. There is no any straight line. The straight lines are coming into the buildings, into the smaller spaces, but really is organic, I think, and that makes this condition very special. If we continue, we see this 1677, again, where is the city? Is almost there, but the lagoon and the territory is more important than the city. And I think this is something that is quite interesting. And that is the protagonist of all the story, how the lagoon is making the urbanization possible or feasible. But then suddenly we can see this image that I think is amazing, is the counter of the other, where we can see the city like a completely I always feel, we did the research on New Orleans, and I feel New Orleans and the river, the Mississippi there, is like a gigantic animal that is changing, is moving. It's like a system of snakes that they are moving into the territory. I have the same feeling. The lagoons are always something that are difficult to map, are difficult to understand. But when you see the other, it's like another animal. And this is Venice, the one that this map is represented in this fantastic operation, let's say in the 15th century. But the action I'd like to draw, and you know very well this map, this is the famous Severino Map, 1557. This is the first time that somebody is talking about the complexity. We are in the 16th century, and he is telling us, attention, the system is in problems. The system has big problems. The system is out of control. The corruption, use this word, the corruption into the lagoon is terrible, because a lot of external agents are corrupting the lagoon. I think this is quite amazing. And when we see the detail of this work, that he is not only mapping the city and the lagoon together, which I think this is what is unique in this map, he is talking is the first time that he's using the idea of, the name of the map is Pianta di Venice, Pianta di Venezia, meaning that then is another expression that really Pianta is something, is a plan for the city. And that is based very much with the water, with the sewage, with the urban maintenance. I mean, it's really an integration of things. And I think this is what I like very much, to imagine that since the 16th century, there are moments where the city is rethinked, rethought, reconsidered, and putting ahead. And I think this is, I'm sure that I'm not discovering anything new, but for me, it is a fantastic opportunity to see how the Severino Map was put as an element, as an integral. The second point I'd like to touch is the question of the late 19th century and 20th century. This fantastic work from the Istituto d'Architettura e Urbanistica di Venezia, this I think is a fantastic reference for all us. Francesco was mentioning before, I always feel that we learn so much from this institute and all the work done from Samona to all the different teachers of the institute. I think it's a quite interesting piece of the work. I'm just showing you things that probably you know very well. It's the construction of the modern Venice. Because in a certain way, before the second part of the 19th century, Venice was Venice and only few things were in terra firma. But it was a great effort to develop all modernity, all the industrial, heavy industry in terra firma, like many other cities did. When you see the outskirts of Marseille, they have also the heavy industry there. When you go mobile near New Orleans, you have, I mean, that's been always a fashion, is the way. Yeah? I think we have to take into account that a lot of, when we are rethinking the city, sometimes is when we make the big mistakes. That's the reason that we have to be very careful about these things. But I think I like just to show you that is the way that they are presenting the expansion of Marghera. I mean, you can see the way, how the water was put into the system. Today is a modern city, Venice, but it is because they did these gigantic projects. You look at how the canal was reorganized, how it was rebuilt physically. I think this is quite amazing. When the links with with the terra firma and the island was done by the railway, by the car parking and all the system. Those elements are fully essential. How the houses were changed with the idea case sane, the house has to be proper, has to be rational. The people need modern housing. Then how that could be done? I mean, those are fantastic examples how architecture been deployed in the city. Sometimes we feel Venice being this way. Venice is fully rebuilt, like all the cities across the globe. The city is being modernized, and I think that's very important. I mean, the way that the Lido, I mean, all these things for me are quite important, even how the Lido was a place for introducing the new health treatment, all these elements that I think they are important because the tourism come later, like everywhere in the Côte d'Azur, and then following the same type of pattern. You see, for instance, how the famous Riviera in front of San Marco, that sometimes most of us, we are tourists as well, and as a tourist you see that, and it seems always this way, that is fully enlarged and multiplied per 3. And those are the things that have been done to put the city in place and to make the city for the inhabitants and for the visitors as well. Then we enter into this image, which I think, and I'd like to bring you a couple of examples of this discussion as well. The city is part of the water, and the water is something that, in my eyes, should be the leader into the design of the city, should be the important elements. If you take the example of Hangzhou, Hangzhou is a Chinese city. We did research on this city. It's very close to Shanghai. You can see with this image already how important is the water in the way that the city is stabilized, is organized. This city is very well known by the lake, the West Lake. Probably is a UNESCO site as well. It's a beautiful, fantastic place. But even this place comes from this movement of the water. The West Lake never existed before. It's like one of the operations of the water. Always all the beautiful things that we like are man-made built. But in a certain moment, when they were rethinking this region, they make this fantastic lake, which you can see here in the history. This image is only 50 years ago, the bottom image. But you can see now the bottom is up and you can see down. The city in 50 years got 8 million inhabitants with a very weak system, a fragile system that Margaret Plant will say. They make it happen. Then is the problem of the lake, but the problem of the canal. This is the Grand Canal going to Beijing that makes Hangzhou the capital of China because of that, because of this existing, of this element, and a system of canals that makes the agriculture very, very successful. I like to draw your attention how the cities can be transformed, like probably Venice did already, but even getting to another scale that could be this dramatic scale I'm referring. Here you can see still the lake, you can see the river, but you can see the system of the water, which still is very much in place. You can see the outskirts, how still the water is leading the development of this system. And you can see that it's not just a continuous development, but it's the water, the one that makes this system tied together. The second example, otherwise Francesco will protest if I'm not talking about Barcelona. What I want to say about this. Barcelona is the contrary, is this mineral city. You can see a continuous city having some very beautiful examples in terms of architecture that most of us, we can share when discuss. But the important thing is when you consider a city with the terra firma, with all the territory around, like probably is what needs to be done in Venice, in my eyes, when you take that into consideration, you have this image that the city is huge. Now we're having a look to 4 million city, that is what we have, but we can see that. Usually our cities, they have as much space as unbuilt as the space built. We usually talk about this. We talk about what we built. But we have to take into consideration that there are a lot of spaces that they are unbuilt. Probably this is a question that I'm very interested in because I think that is very potential in terms of Venice. When you can see that unbuilt and the built can merge together. And I think this is probably something that is very important when we are looking at the city of the future. That this idea that probably the modern movement introduced the idea that here is the city, the other is the countryside, is not any longer possible. We have to try to find, and here is where I feel that Venice could be a good paradigm for it. So the way Venice, I feel, could be always presented as an example where nature and the lagoon and the city can also meet together. And as Bonnie said before, I fully agree that that also could be one of the ways of presenting Venice as a paradigm, not only because of these special architectural elements that perhaps there could be seen all over, but you can experience spaces because in the end, San Marco we can see with the 3D glasses, but probably this type of experience we are not going to see in the next couple of decades. And that could be an excellent way of developing that. But even considering, and that is the point I like to make also talking about Barcelona, that when you have an agglomeration of cities, and that is the case of Barcelona, you can see in the image to the right, the metropolitan, let's say the entity as a whole. And the other, you can see the pieces that make the development. Sometimes we tend to imagine this word metropolis as something that is a governance together. We have to invent, in my eyes, new contents for that. If we insist on that, we are lost. If we take the example of Boston, a place that I know very well, you have, in Boston, you have the airport. But next to Boston, you have Cambridge. Do you imagine that the people of Cambridge, where you have MIT, Harvard, these people like to be in Boston agglomeration? No. We are better, we are different. But you can federate them together because they need to share the airport, they need to share many things. I think we have to start inventing new systems because if not, if we go back to the 70s and we return saying we need a metropolitan scale, blah, 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 it's fine, we need that. But probably today we can manage in many different ways, and that I think we have to be smart in this respect. Coming back to Venice, I feel the opportunity that the city has comes in a moment that many cities are rethinking the future because there are new paradigms. This morning, the president of the Fondazione Cini reminded us to say, attention, the industry that was the base of this terra firma development is gone, has to be developed. New activities should be put. And I think is when we have to start imagining in what sense this system of pieces that compose Venice in its modernity, which for me is a value, is there, how these things can be turned in another condition. New paradigms are demanding today. And I think Bonnie already mentioned some of these elements in some of the examples that she mentioned, but I feel that today our society, and mainly the culture which is emerging, is demanding very much a sustainable environment. The people are not able to accept that we are contaminating at this level. That is sure. I mean, the new generations are really in favor of that. They are recycling more than anybody before. There's a way, what to do with that? How this city, how this new modernity we can call, how like these guys did in the late 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, what are the devices, what are the elements, what are the processes we have to put in place? The better use of the energy that we have in the cities, how the nature and the city can better merge together. I think this could be, for me, one of the most interesting elements to put in place. How the development could be more inclusive. The development could take into account the people that they are involved in that. If we think only with the very specialized jobs, what we call the knowledge-based economy, most of the people in Venice will be off. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, there are a lot of service to be developed. And there's perhaps this employment could be linked to some social housing strategies. And there are a lot of apartments possible. And I think, like you were mentioning, the Amsterdam example is something done in a capitalist society, in a very well-developed democracy. And those things must be possible. Then probably when we think about that is when I feel that even elements like this, you can see the famous arrival of the train and the car into the island. Perhaps is the moment that these elements could be put into the discussion. I mean, they are perhaps Venice. I'm sure that those things are in the air in Venice, and probably at the School of Architecture, these elements being discussed. But I think new narratives, when you consider the example, you know that Saint Michel, well, that was a gigantic parking next to a beautiful place. Today, the parking is outside. I mean, it's a moment where, by rethinking, then some of these projects could be. I'm insisting, I'm not doing any proposal for this fantastic place. I'm not here to do that, but I feel that by this this promenade that I did with some books, and then, to be honest, feeling more in love with Venice. I think always when you research one city and you understand one city, you discover new dimensions that before you didn't know about that. No? And then you come up with the idea that perhaps when Italo Calvino was saying, because Italo Calvino, I think all we love, no? Invisible cities, but when he was using Marco Polo to tell us what the way he feels about the city. And Marco Polo always trying to impress and to fight dialectically with the Emperor Khan. He was telling him, attention, when I'm saying something about one city, I'm describing my Venice. And I think in a way that he was telling us that Venice has something everywhere, because here are always the dimensions. And I feel that this, for me, is a very positive image. It's the way that Venice can be presented as this city where the people, that they are coming to Venice, not by the banal tourists, but they are coming to learn how other cities could be, and how also the natural space and the city can meet. And that could be a good way of imagining that Venice has been exceptional in the history, but could be also a paradigm today. And probably in this moment, or in this story, in the way I feel, and the previous presentation from Bonnie Burram, I think makes very clear. I mean, we should not be so afraid of the tourism. I always feel the tourism is a positive element by the fact that it's there. I always feel it's better to have people that they want to come and want to invest and want to do things that not when you have. Then is the moment that you can make a deal. You can start a dialogue. The problem is when one city has no any interest. I remember I was working, Francesco mentioned before, for the city of Toledo. Beautiful city. It's like a Venice in the middle of the desert in Spain. But there was nobody in the city center, only buildings. Then it's a disaster. Then you have to create flows to bring people. And today, Toledo is having a lot of tourism. And they have a lot of problems. Okay, welcome. Because that meaning that then you can start dealing. And you showed before that there are many ways of dealing with that. And I think a workshop like that, the ways I see, because I feel fully foreign to this discussion, probably some of you as well, but I think perhaps we can help Venice and in general, the region and Italy and Europe in general, to create new narratives. I think it's very important to create new ways. If we still feel the tourists with the same glasses that the 70s and the 80s, we are lost. Today, there are many different ways that we can present the city and we should present. And of course, these guys that they are coming now with the cruise, those could come in another way. Even the cruise can pass without touching, and they can see. I mean, there are many, many different ways that should be put on the table. And today, I think the experience of so many other cities is what they can make. But for me, the best advice is to say, attention, Venice has so many values, and not only architecturally, but there are so many values in the history, in a way that we just discovered having a look into plans. But this city is you can see this library. I mean, you can discover so many capacities that probably is what that makes I remember the famous architect that was Italian architect that we learned, Gustavo Giovannoni. He was saying, what is important, one city is very good when you start walking in the city and you can be lost into the city. That is a good city, and that probably no one city could be better than Venice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joan. You know, I think you're helping us a lot to think out of the box, and this is, you know, the most difficult thing sometimes, you know, because we're trying to be, with the tendencies to look at your own problems, to think that you are unique, that there is no other problems like yours, and so on. So I think we have to really expand our comparative, you know, analysis and see that how others have you know, dealt with the issues. Second thing that I think I'd like to remark is that we have to look at the future. In fact, many cities are doing that. Venice is not doing it. This perhaps, you know, is something I find recurrent, you know, that there is no future thinking here. We think of next 6 months, next season, and so on, but perhaps we use the time of the politicians and not the time of the planners and not the time of those who, of heritage, not the time of heritage, which is long term. Okay, we'll come back to this in the discussion. Now we have the pleasure, I hope,